Hello, everybody. It is me. I am back, Corey, Truly Evil Bob, doing the show Capes and Lasers on KRUA, the show that talks about sci-fi, fantasy, and comic books. Yes, all of your naughty little pop culture dreams here on KRUA. So let's dive right in. Oh, actually, before that, remember, I'm on Twitter, at Truly Evil Bob. Give me a tweet. Join the conversation. Tell me what you think about the things that are in the realm of science fiction and fantasy today. And I'd love to hear from you at Truly Evil Bob on Twitter. Let's go right into the news now. So the news of the day, of the week, of this past week, what happened to Star Wars is probably the biggest thing on people's minds. Because Colin Trevorrow, the director of Jurassic World, who was going to direct Episode 9, Star Wars Episode 9, has been replaced by J.J. Abrams. And this has gotten some criticism in the fandom world here. A lot of people didn't like The Force Awakens because J.J. Abrams was the guy who directed The Force Awakens. They said it was too much like A New Hope. Like he just copy-pasted A New Hope and made a new movie with different actors. And even this new movie coming out that Rian Johnson is directing, The Last Jedi, feels a lot like Empire Strikes Back in a lot of ways. We're going to have a Luke and Rey training scene like Yoda and Luke. We're going to have a casino world, kind of like the resort of Cloud City, where things are going to happen. Could Rian Johnson have broken away from that and done something different? I don't know. J.J. Abrams set up the direction of the story so well that it would be hard to move away from that in any meaningful way. But now J.J. Abrams is coming back to do the last of the three films, Episode 9, which hasn't been named yet. There's no title to it. And Disney, this is weird because Disney has been replacing a lot of directors lately on their Star Wars films. It seems like every new Star Wars film, we don't like these guys. Like, for example, the Han Solo flick that's coming out. Chris Miller and Phil Lord did like 21 Jump Street and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and those types of films. Well, gone from the Han Solo film, and replaced with Ron Howard, a much safer director, a director that'll follow the status quo, in the same way that Colin Trevorrow is being pulled off of Episode 9, and J.J. Abrams, who started this entire thing, he's been proven to show that he can understand the world of Star Wars and all of the thematics that go around, all the setting pieces, and make a story in the Star Wars universe. The problem is his stories aren't very original, and he likes to set up all of these like mysteries in his movies, only to not actually have answers for those mysteries. They're just mysteries, and and that's he gets a lot of criticism for that in a lot of his television shows, Alias and Lost. Oh yeah, Lost, where the answers aren't as satisfying as the mystery, and that's because he leaves other people to make up the answers. The writers can do that. This is the mystery I want. This is the feel. And that leaves him kind of lacking when it comes to endings. And this will be the ending to the 3-movie arc. Are you scared? Do you think it's going to be a wah wah? A lot of people are scared about that. So what does this mean for Star Wars going forward? Are we going to have any type of creative talent that will push the boundaries of Star Wars? It doesn't look good for this. It looks like it's going to be the same old stuff for every movie over and over again. And that doesn't look good for the franchise, in my opinion. Yeah, we wanted that old feel to come back, and we got it, and we're very happy with that. But now it's time to take that old feel and push the boundaries. And I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I think it has to, though, for the franchise to survive. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars. But hey, let's go into what Rian Johnson says about The Last Jedi and who The Last Jedi is. He revealed to the public who The Last Jedi is. And it is Luke Skywalker. It's self-evident. It wasn't a mystery or anything like that. It wasn't made to be a mystery. Luke Skywalker's The Last Jedi. The movie's about Luke Skywalker. That's it. Another Star Wars character, Captain Phasma. If you liked her, and really, we wanted to see more Captain Phasma. And Rian Johnson has promised she is going to look like the kick-butt soldier that we were promised, and it's gonna happen. Hopefully, I got a lot riding on this. She's got the cool silver armor. We want to see her just destroy people. So she's getting her own comic story, and it's gonna tell how she gets out of the trash compactor on the Starkiller base. Do we really want to know how she got out of it? If you want to, Captain Phasma comic coming up next month. Go on down to Bosco's or wherever and pick yourself up a copy. I subscribe to all the Star Wars books, all of the Star Wars comics, so I'll tell you how it is when it comes out if you're kind of squeamish about going out and spending some money. Let's move from Star Wars to Star Trek. Star Trek Discovery's main theme music has been released, and it is epic and flowing and everything you want about Star Trek. Star Trek Discovery looks like it's going to be great from everything I've seen it. But I suggest you go. It's on YouTube. Go look up the Star Trek theme music and do that. If you love Star Trek, you'll love this piece. So iPhone, I'm going to talk about the iPhone real quick. So the iPhone X, it's pronounced 10, iPhone 10, and this is not like science fiction, this is actually like technology of today now, has this facial recognition thing on it. And I've talked to a lot of my friends about this, and they're very concerned about Big Brother. Because we hear that the NSA or the CIA goes to tech firms and asks them for all of their data. Because it's not your data, it's their data. And Apple has been very squeamish about giving up what they have. And my friends don't want all of their facial recognition stuff in Apple's hands. But the technology is really cool. It uses like an IR camera and a 3D camera and all of these different tools to do facial recognition. And it can recognize if you grew a beard or if you changed your hair color, if you got a haircut or, that kind of stuff. General changes to your face over time. It predicts them and basically updates itself as it goes and has like a 1 in a million chance of being randomly turned on by another person's face. It's really cool. Also, they have animojis where basically it's an emoji and then you look at it and like make expressions and stuff, and the emoji will follow your expressions creepily, and then you can send that Animoji to your friend to show off your expression in cartoon form. It's kind of uncanny valley and kind of cute. I don't know where I'm going to fall on this. I have to play around with it to actually. I know everybody's going to play around with it when the phone comes out. It's going to be a thing. You watch. But let's get back to the Big Brother, the 1984, the Big Brother watching you, gathering all your information. How is Apple going to protect you? Well, all of your facial recognition will not be in the cloud. It will not be uploaded to Apple. All of that stuff is self-contained on your phone in something they call a neural engine. Basically, it's just a fancy microchip. So all of that will be taken care of on board your phone. So unless they physically take your phone, they cannot get your facial recognition identity. And that's supposed to be the security precaution that Apple wants to put in place, because after the cloud was hacked like 2 years ago, and the fappening happened, if you remember that, it was a bunch of basically a bunch of celebrities got hacked, like Jennifer Lawrence, to name one of the bigger names, and they were sending nude photos of themselves to their current significant others and that kind of stuff. Flirtatious photography that showed off a little bit more than they should. And all of it got hacked, and all of it got onto the internet, and it shouldn't have. These were private. These weren't for the public consumption. And Apple got super embarrassed. Their stock went down. They don't want this to happen again. They never want this to happen again. So they're really trying to step up their game for consumer protection, which I think is a good thing. I know a lot of people, we don't have trust in technology nowadays, and for very, very good reason, right? We're always warned what to and what not to put on the internet because we don't want it out there. And sometimes we feel like, our private texts should remain private. Our private phone calls should remain private. But it's not always the case, and we know it. We've seen it. We've heard the stories, and I'm very concerned about this. So do you trust the iPhone X? Is this 1984? Is this Orson Welles coming to fruition? Hey, I'm at Truly Evil Bob. Tell me what you think. Let's step away from real stuff and go back into the realm of science fiction. I hope you guys like Rick and Morty. Most of the show is going to be Rick and Morty and Orville today. But Rick and Morty released a preview of their newest episode coming out on this Sunday. And it seems to be making fun of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. If you're a fan of Neil Gaiman, if you don't know who he is a prolific author who writes a lot of kind of fantasy stuff. And new American Gods is now made into a series on Starz. It's excellent. You should watch it. But if you don't want to spend the money to get Starz, go get American Gods, the novel, and read it. It is an amazing book. More Neil Gaiman stuff is coming to television. Amazon is making a series based on Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's Good Omens. And I am super looking forward to that. I'm in the middle of that book right now. I got it on Amazon, and I gotta say I am super happy with it. But the first place I heard of Neil Gaiman was in a comic book series, a Vertigo comic series called The Sandman. And it's a seminal book. You should read it. If you like gritty graphic novels, it's one of the best. So Rick and Morty will be parodying it in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's the entire episode. I'm not sure. But you can never tell. I mean, we got trolled by last week's Rick and Morty, the Rick Lantis mix-up, which I will be going into in greater detail much later, because it's one of the best pieces of science fiction I have seen in a long time. So let's go into the realm of comic books. Comic book movies coming out. Of course, we're all looking forward to the new Wonder Woman 2. And Patty Jenkins is 100% confirmed. She's all signed on, and she's ready to go for the new Wonder Woman 2 movie. She could have moved on from the project. There could have been another director. Nothing is ever set in stone. But now it is. The contracts are a done deal. Patty Jenkins will be returning for Wonder Woman 2. So that only says good things for me, because I like the first one. So hopefully I'll like the second one. The first one had its problems, but they're far overshadowed by what was great about the film. It's kind of like watching The Dark Knight, where The Dark Knight obviously has problems, but it's such a great movie and it's such a good like thriller that you kind of ignore all of the problems because it's such a fun ride. Speaking of Batman, the new Gotham preview came out for this season's Gotham. I'm hit or miss on Gotham. Some parts of that show are amazing. There are just some really great, phenomenal episodes in it. But for the most part, it kind of falls a bit flat. There are just big lulls and places where you have filler episodes that I just don't care about. Especially when the Riddler has a love interest. It's just, I don't want this. It's terrible. Please just make it stop. This new Gotham preview shows now Bruce Wayne is finally going through his transformation into Batman. He's basically wearing a black mask and being a vigilante. Yeah, that's what's happening with Batman. Kind of reminiscent of Batman Begins, if you ever read that graphic novel. Not Batman Begins, Batman Year One. Batman Begins was heavily influenced by Batman Year One. Frank Miller's Batman Year One told the story of how Batman becomes Batman during his first year of being a vigilante. And it's a bit reminiscent of that. If you watch the Daredevil series, it feels kind of like that too. He's just wearing a generic black costume and kind of develops himself throughout the season. And we're going to head on over to Marvel Land, where Deadpool 2, the Deadpool 2 movie, has its new director. That movie is coming together rather quickly. We got Brolin doing Cable. We got our Domino. This movie looks like all of the pegs are coming right in together. And the director is going to be Drew Goddard, the director from Cabin in the Woods. So everything, like, this movie looks great on paper. And considering how good the first one was, everything lines up just right, just like it is. I think we're in for a treat with Deadpool 2. I think it's going to be as good as the first one, hopefully better. Maybe we'll get like a Spider-Man 2 thing out of it, where the sequel is better than the original. I hope so. I really enjoy Deadpool right now, like a lot of people are. So, Thor Ragnarok is coming up. Before that, of course, the movie I'm looking forward to is the new Blade Runner, coming out in a week or two. But hey, Marvel movies, they all stem from one creative genius. That's right, Jack Kirby. But also Stan Lee. Stan Lee has said something interesting. His neighbor is Leonardo DiCaprio, and they talk quite a bit. He has inferred that Leonardo DiCaprio wants to play a young Stan Lee in some sort of documentary or something like that. So, which is interesting because DC wants Leonardo DiCaprio to play the Joker in the Martin Scorsese Joker film, which is, I can't believe those words have come out of my mouth, but there you go. That's the world we live in nowadays. But yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio wants to play Stan Lee. And that sounds fun. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the life of Stan Lee and the creation of Marvel Comics and all of these characters. How he kind of treated people like Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby. How he perceives it, how they perceived it from what you've read. Because Jack Kirby died in the late 90s, and I remember when it happened, and everybody came together in the comic community to celebrate his contribution to comic books. And when you talk about Jack Kirby, you usually talk about Stan Lee and their bumpy relationship. So it would be great. That sounds like perfect, a docudrama fabric right there. But hey, let's talk about another Marvel creator. A little bit of bad news. Len Wein the creator of Wolverine, died this last week at the age of 69. He was a phenomenal comic book writer. And like I said, he's created Wolverine. He also worked on many other like Silver Age comic books. But he was also a writer on Batman the Animated Series. So, his lack of presence will be felt within the comic book community as well, since he is pretty prolific. So that's it. That's the news. That's everything that has happened in the past week when it comes to sci-fi, fantasy, and comic books. So let's get into some meat. Let's talk about let's get ankle deep into some science fiction here and talk about Rick and Morty. I really haven't talked about Rick and Morty on this show, even though it has a pretty good, it has a phenomenal fan base. The show is excellent, but it's always been a parody. So I'm going to talk about two parodies. I'm going to talk about Rick and Morty, and we'll talk about Orville a little later, because I really haven't talked about parodies much. And that's because they don't have a lot to say on science fiction, but rather they want to poke fun at science fiction. And maybe I'm short-sighted in that, because I watched the last episode of Rick and Morty, the Ricklantis mix-up, and was stunned. I was floored by this cartoon that pokes fun at science fiction because of the messages embedded in this little, slapsticky, funny poop comedy. It is some of the best written science fiction I have seen in a while, and it tackles some really tough issues. So let me give you the rundown of this episode. So Rick and Morty are a duo. Rick is a wacky scientist who is the smartest man in the freaking universe, and his grandson Morty comes along with him on his ventures as his plucky sidekick who doesn't know much, but learns from Rick as a mentor. And their adventures revolve around a gun that creates portals, this like little portal device that opens up rifts between universes. And there's an infinite number of universes that are slightly different. They're all a little different than each other. That's basically the premise. And they go from like universe to universe, getting into mischief and mayhem. And they usually have self-serving ideals rather than caring about humanity or anything like that. Though those messages are in there, and messages about the human condition are in there, which leads me to this episode, the Ricklantis mix-up. So because there are all these universes out there, and they're all similar but different, there are an amazing amount of Ricks and Mortys. Each universe, not every universe, but most universes has their own Rick and Morty as well. And most of them have created their own portal guns, universal portal guns. And they can all travel between universes. And because of this, they created the Council of Ricks at the Citadel. And the Council of Ricks is basically a parody of the Council of Mr. Fantastics in the Marvel Comics. There is, because that happens too, there is a council of Mr. Fantastics that kind of rule over the multiverse or police the multiverse. And this is the same thing. The Council of Ricks police the multiverse to minimize the damage done by Ricks. And they come out of this place called the Citadel. And the Citadel is where like all these it's a hub for Rick and Mortys. So Rick has destroyed the ruling council of the Citadel. He's basically killed them because they came after him. The Rick that is the main character Rick of the story has basically destroyed the government of the Citadel. And the Ricklantis mix-up is Rick and Morty are about to go off on an adventure to Atlantis. But no, we're not going to follow them there. We're in fact going to go to the Citadel and look at life, an in-depth look at life at the Citadel. And the first thing you'll notice is that the Citadel is like a big thriving city, and it has its police force and it has its manufacturing. But the only people who live there are Ricks and Mortys. There's no other person there. And these Ricks and Mortys are put into two castes, the Ricks and the Mortys. And the Ricks, basically, they hold down jobs. They're the teachers, the factory workers, the management, the leaders. They're the upper caste, obviously. And then there are the Mortys. And the Mortys are to be cared for. They're the students. They can't really hold jobs, except for one Morty we see as a police officer. But he seems like an old Morty. And there's actually a stupid Rick. And it's a really funny scene where it's like all of the students, the Morty students, are in school listening to the professor, the Rick professor. And then there's a dumb Rick. And the professor keeps calling him, tall Morty. Not you, tall Morty. You're going to do... and he'll get it confused with stupid Rick. He'll sometimes call him stupid Rick and then catch himself and call him, tall Morty. So basically, that Rick comes from a universe where Rick came out dumb, and so they put him, they recast him into the Morty cast system. So it's an interesting thing. So there's this caste system can be looked at like an old world, like men and women were once looked at, which I thought was super interesting. And then we follow the career of one Morty who is basically there's an election for the new leaders of the Citadel, and one of the people coming up for election for the president of the Citadel is a Morty, and no one believes the Morty is going to win, because why would anybody vote for a Morty? Because Mortys are of a subcaste. No one would do it. But there's another pressure in the Citadel. And this is the pressure of inequality of money, inequality of work. And this is a focal point. So there's a factory that creates delicious sugary wafer cookies called Simple Ricks. And Simple Ricks, the core of Simple Ricks is that there is a Rick who is more earthy. He makes things with his hands. He likes woodworking. He has a family that he cares about. And the Ricks have exploited him by putting him into a virtual reality machine where he's always in that situation and he feels great. And then they take the essence of his good feelings and distill it into a wafer cookie. Which sounds delicious, by the way. I kind of want a Simple Rick. But there are those Ricks that work on the cookie line, and there are those Ricks that work in management. And all of the Ricks have pretty much the same IQ, the same personality. They're the same. Yet some Ricks are in management, while other Ricks have really a labor job that requires very little intelligence. And for some reason, they put up with this system. So there's your inequality right there. Even in a world where everyone is actually equal, there are no real differences, still we have this system of inequality. And this inequality leads to a great deal of strife. One of the Ricks that works on the line, he's as intelligent as any of the other Ricks, goes rogue and takes Simple Ricks hostage. And, of course, he's punished for it. He is eventually enslaved. He kills the Rick that's part of the Simple Ricks. And then he becomes the new Simple Rick because he feels like he won. They put him in a virtual reality simulator where he believes that he actually beat the system. And the joy that comes from him doing that is distilled into the new Simple Rick's wafer cookie. So let's go back to the Morty that's trying to win this election. He works on a populist campaign pointing out the inequalities, much in the same way that Donald Trump did. And of course, he wins because he does this, especially because there's an assassination attempt on him, which gives him even more publicity, and he survives. And when he wins the election, he turns out to be a tyrant, a terrible human being, one of the worst. He's going to basically rule the multiverse with an iron fist. And this goes into a lot of science fiction tales where strife by inequality leads to a populist leader who becomes a dictator. And these things are actually bore out by reality as well. We see it in real life. We're constantly warned that this could happen to Donald Trump. And if we didn't have the protections of our Constitution, that's pretty much the only thing holding our president back from becoming that, which is, it's a controversial topic. But does Rick and Morty speak to you in this way? But the Orville. So we talked about Rick and Morty, a great parody, a great comedy that's animated. The Orville did an hour-long premiere, 45 minutes if you watched it online, and don't care about those pesky commercials. So the Orville is it's basically like Space Quest. It's a Star Trek parody. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Seth MacFarlane has always said he wanted to write for Star Trek. He wanted to create his own Star Trek series. But Paramount would never let him do that. He pitched to him several times. It never happened, never materialized. So he went to Fox, and instead of... because you can't just rip off Star Trek. So he created a parody. And his parody is called Orville. And he's the main character. Seth MacFarlane plays Ed Mercer, the captain of the Orville, which is the spaceship. His love interest is Adrian Padalecki, who plays Kelly Grayson, who was his ex-wife, who for some reason becomes the first officer of the Orville. And there's a lot of tension there and that type of thing. And one of the characters I want to point out, because there's a lot of characters in this, but the one that sticks out, Scott Grimes plays Gordon Malloy, and he's the best friend of Ed Mercer and the pilot, the helmsman of the Orville. So there's been a ton of negative reviews on this, and I want to go into some of the negative reviews that this show has gotten, because I enjoyed it. I'm going to come straight up front and say I liked it. If you're a fan of Star Trek, you should watch it. There's still stuff to enjoy there if you're not a fan, but it looks like if you're not a fan, it may not hold up as well. Because a lot of these reviewers, I guess they don't understand it. So here's the first gripe that I'm seeing in reviews. And it's too much like Star Trek. That's right. Oh, it's the Orville, aka the Enterprise, and they fight the Krill, which are aka the Klingons. They're exactly the same. And I don't think that's a fair criticism, because this is a parody. You copy the original source material in a parody and present it in a comedic light. That's the entire point of what a parody is. So that's a non-point. it has no bearing on anything. It's like saying, oh, the Tick is terrible because all it is Superman, and all of the villains look like Superman villains. But and then they just casually throw jokes in. That's the definition of a parody. And that's another thing about Orville is, oh, it's just like Star Trek, but they throw these jokes in. Yeah, that's a parody. That's what a parody is. So another criticism is that the not funny scenes, the story scenes, feel drawn out, boring, they fall flat. And there are points in time where I can see that. There's a point where Kelly Grayson, First Officer Kelly Grayson, meets up with helmsman Gordon Malloy, and Gordon's running off to go to the bathroom. He's like, I gotta go to the bathroom, which you never see on, like, how do you go to the bathroom in space? You know, that question. And she talks to him about, hey, do you resent me? I don't want any bad blood between us. I want to make sure that the ship runs great. And he kind of lies and whatnot. It's supposed to be funny, I guess, but the entire scene falls really flat. And I get that. That said, there's a lot of scenes that aren't funny that do really well. For example, the scene where the Krill start doing a firefight in the lab and the scientist gets caught up in the time accelerator machine and instantly becomes old and gray and dies right there. It's super great. So yeah, there's some hit or miss there. But then they go on the other side and say, and then the funny scenes are trite and they're not funny. So, you know, they get them coming and going. And the funny scenes I find are truly funny. There's a scene where he's being introduced to all of the crew members. And one of them is this kind of robotic alien. And he's like, oh, I don't see you much in the fleet because I heard you're all racist, extremely racist. And he's like, we are not racist, but we are superior to all other life forms. And there it is. There's the racism. It was funny. I liked it. There are a bunch of other funny scenes in it. Like there's a holodeck scene that pokes fun at the holodeck. I found so well done. Just perfect. It's exactly how anybody would actually use the holodeck instead of how they used it on Star Trek. Yeah, there's a scene poking fun at seatbelts on the Enterprise. So it's great. They actually, you know, go through gripes people have about Star Trek and they kind of poke at it and use it for comedy. Of course, if you don't know about Star Trek, then maybe those jokes fall a little flat. I'm not too sure. I think if I didn't never watch Star Trek, I'd still enjoy this show. But yeah, go watch it. It's only like the first episode. They're going to make it into a series. The first episode is only there. They're not going to put out another one until the fall season. It was just this big preview to hype up the show. And I looked at reviewers online, and the professional reviewers, especially the young reviewers, did not like it because they compare it to shows like Futurama and Rick and Morty, and they'll say something like, well, maybe these shows should be regulated to just animation because they don't work well in live action. Even though you have the Tick Show on Amazon Prime, a live action superhero parody, and it's fantastic. But no. These reviewers know best, right? And then you look at the public's reaction. And when you look at the public's reaction, they give it a good 7.5. They give it an above average grade. Most people are enjoying this show. So, a lot of times there is this disconnect between the viewing public and the actual the actual reviewers and what they think. But yeah, there's stuff to love about the Orville, but technically it could be better. There could be more polish in this show. Uh, this effects in it are really great. I love the ship effects. I love the piloting through space and using space to their advantage. I love like the weird three CGI underwater doctor that's in it. It's the effects are good. The characters aren't developed yet, and we're going to get there throughout the series. We have a ton of more episodes to go, and as this series develops from a Star Trek parody to its own thing, you'll see even the show grow. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Hey, Rick and Morty started out as a parody of Back to the Future. If you didn't know, yeah, Cannes Film Festival animated short where Morty is Marty. Marty McFly, and goes on time traveling adventures with Doc Brown, who is Rick. And they just remade those characters into Rick and Morty for Adult Swim. And yeah, the first episode was really great, but the more you watch Rick and Morty, the better that show gets as you get deeper into what these characters are, how these characters evolved, and what they will become. I mean, if you look at the original, Simpsons, and you look at the Simpsons are who they are today, they seem like different characters almost. And that's true for almost any show out there, any show. So, should you give Orville a chance? I say yes. Give it the good try. If you don't like it, hey man, everybody's got their own taste, and I understand that. So that's my time. That's Capes and Lasers. I will be back next Wednesday, noon. Enjoy the lunch break with you, and I'll see you next week where we'll be talking more science fiction and fantasy. I'll see you then.